A group of people at a secret location is planning how to kidnap a Nobel scientist and how to poison 500,000 people at once. Is this a crazy conspiracy of Nazi Germany? No, another group of Nobel-level scientists is behind the planning. Hello. Today, we will discuss the true story and history of Robert Oppenheimer. Robert Oppenheimer was born into a wealthy Jewish family. His mother was an artist, and his father ran a textile import business in New York. His father came to the United States in 1888 with nothing and no education, not even knowing English. However, that didn't stop him from working hard, continuously learning, and striving for success. He started working in a counterfeit company, making ordinary lighters. But in less than 10 years, he became a high-ranking executive in the company and became rich. His family became so wealthy that their art collection included original works by Picasso and several Van Gogh paintings. Perhaps inheriting these traits from his father, Oppenheimer excelled from a young age and was a top performer among his peers. His extraordinary life seemed unstoppable. He completed the 3rd and 4th grades in 1 year and even skipped 8th grade. During school, he challenged his classmates with Latin questions and answered in Greek. After high school, he got into Harvard, studying chemistry. Harvard required students studying natural sciences to also study history, literature, philosophy, or mathematics. To catch up with the curriculum, he took an additional 6 courses each semester. Not only did he catch up with ease, but he also briefly joined the Honors Student Association. While his academic progress was rapid, his dark side started to emerge. After Harvard in 1925, he went to Cambridge for further studies. Oppenheimer's mentor at Cambridge was the equally intelligent Patrick Blackett, who won the Nobel Prize in 1948. Blackett was only a few years older than Oppenheimer. Initially, Oppenheimer wanted to study experimental physics, but due to his clumsiness in the laboratory, he failed to make much progress. For a genius, this was a very rare setback, while Blackett always appeared incredibly relaxed and at ease, which made Oppenheimer very jealous and led him to consider switching to theoretical physics. However, Blackett pressured Oppenheimer to continue, which made Oppenheimer very unhappy. Because no genius likes others to give them orders. In 1926, when scientists went on vacation, Oppenheimer became very restless. Under questioning from his accompanying friends, he finally confessed that he must return to Cambridge immediately. I don't know if this guy has read too much Snow White fairy tale, but he learned a trick from the Queen. Before going on vacation, he applied poisonous laboratory chemicals to an apple and put it on Blackett's desk. Oppenheimer wanted to rush back to Cambridge to ensure Blackett's safety. Fortunately, Blackett discovered the plot and reported the whole thing to the management at Cambridge. In fact, this was not the first time Oppenheimer attempted to harm others or commit murder. When he was on vacation in Cambridge, he went to Paris to meet his good friend Ferguson. Ferguson noticed that Oppenheimer's mood was not particularly good, and he seemed very depressed. To distract him from his depression, Ferguson told Oppenheimer that he was going to marry his beloved girlfriend. You see, are these scientists just like the geniuses in the Big Bang Theory, completely clueless about human affairs? The way to comfort your friend with depression is to tell him that you're going to marry your favorite girlfriend. Obviously, Oppenheimer did not think this was good news. On the contrary, he pounced on Ferguson and tried to strangle him. Although Ferguson easily blocked him, this incident cast a shadow over their friendship, and even violent disputes between friends can be resolved privately, but attempting to poison a colleague is unlikely to go unnoticed. Soon, this matter reached the highest level at Cambridge. At that time, the unanimous decision was to expel him. However, there was no consensus on whether to involve the police. In the end, Oppenheimer received probation and was required to regularly see London's most famous psychiatrist for a mental evaluation. Interesting, right? Many historians and biographers tend to believe that Oppenheimer's parents used their influence to downplay the incident. I am more inclined to accept that the reason he did not receive severe punishment was the result of his parents' efforts behind the scenes and his so-called practical intelligence. I will continue to talk about this later. Even though seeing a psychologist is not considered a punishment, he didn't go many times. Not long after, Oppenheimer accepted an invitation from another physics master, Max Born, and left Cambridge to study theoretical physics at the University of Göttingen. After that, his footprint spread across Europe and America in all the top theoretical physics schools until he got a teaching position at the University of California, Berkeley. There, he began to slowly demonstrate his leadership abilities. Many of his students and colleagues became his admirers, admiring his extraordinary intelligence and extensive knowledge. They found him fascinating in private interactions, but often distant in public settings. Some people thought he was cold and indifferent, while most considered him an impressive genius and idealist. During his time at UC Berkeley, he had already established a reputation among colleagues and students. It was said that he always knew what the most important problems were and needed to be prioritized. Even though he had more than 10 students and 6 or 7 postdoctoral scholars to mentor, he managed to find common ground with each of them. This led to his swift promotion from an associate professor to a full-time professor. Remember the practical intelligence we mentioned earlier? This aspect of him was fully developed and showcased during his first faculty position, which paved the way for him to become the leader of the Manhattan Project. General Leslie Groves was in charge of the atomic bomb research in the Manhattan Project. He searched throughout the United States for a suitable person to lead the atomic bomb research. At that time, Oppenheimer was only 38 years old, younger than many under Groves's command. This was a job that required the skills of an experimental engineer, while Oppenheimer was a theoretical physicist. Furthermore, Oppenheimer's social circle included many communists. Although it was quite common in the United States at that time, being involved in an important national security weapon development project was still a significant opportunity. He was at a turning point in his life, full of confidence. Even on the security clearance form for the Manhattan Project, he wrote, "Though I am not a communist, I am a member of practically every Communist Front organization on the West Coast." Little did he know that decades later, this would become a lifelong nightmare for him. At the time, there were many candidates for the Manhattan Project, and he was the only one without any management experience. His appearance didn't help either. He always wore worn-out shoes and a peculiar hat. Moreover, he was completely ignorant about various equipment. Some even teased him, saying that if you gave him a hamburger stand, he wouldn't know how to operate it. Oppenheimer didn't care about this. His practical intelligence made him understand how to win General Groves's support. So, he did his best in front of Groves, fully showcasing his talents. Groves later recalled that Oppenheimer was truly irresistible, a genuine genius. The reason Groves chose Oppenheimer was not just for his outstanding achievements in theoretical physics, but also for his practical skills in designing and manufacturing atomic bombs, as well as his extensive knowledge. As an engineering graduate from MIT himself, Groves knew that the leader of this project couldn't be simply a Nobel Prize-winning physicist. They needed knowledge and skills from multiple scientific and technical fields. Of course, what Groves valued most was Oppenheimer's ambitious self-confidence. Although Groves wasn't outstanding in the technological field and was seen as a military man on the streets, the great thing about great mentors is that they might not be extraordinary themselves, but they possess the ability to discover geniuses, making them exceptional. Oppenheimer understood that designing an atomic bomb couldn't solely rely on breakthroughs in a single field. It required simultaneous progress in multiple disciplines to find a practical and feasible approach. He was the first among the many candidates to propose this perspective. He suggested establishing a central laboratory, and Groves unknowingly accepted his idea. This informal acceptance later became formal. The entire Manhattan Project required solving military, physics, chemistry, metallurgy, engineering, and many other problems. Soon, the laboratory started construction in New Mexico. Due to the unique research goals, the military intended to turn it into an army laboratory, which meant that all researchers had to become soldiers. Oppenheimer even bought a set of loyal military uniforms for himself. However, it was apparent that this thin and frail man couldn't pass the medical examination. Moreover, other scientists opposed this idea, and eventually it was dropped. One can imagine that in such a laboratory, countless top scientists wouldn't accept the conventional duties of being soldiers. So, conflicts between the scientists and the military were inevitable. Interestingly, this provided Oppenheimer with an excellent opportunity. On one hand, he earned the respect of most scientists and researchers with his extensive knowledge in the scientific field. On the other hand, he actively mediated conflicts with the military. Many researchers involved in the Manhattan Project later recalled that Oppenheimer's most significant contribution wasn't just the remarkable proposals and discoveries during the process, but his willingness not to boss people around in his office. He was hands-on in every important decision and never shied away from them. This undoubtedly made all the researchers feel like valuable participants in a significant project, rather than just small cogs in a machine. It created an unprecedented atmosphere of passion and challenge in the laboratory. which played a crucial role in the ultimate success of the atomic bomb research. This was confirmed by observations made by Enrico Fermi, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist in 1938. Fermi was transferred from Chicago to the laboratory and noticed the striking difference in morale and atmosphere between the two places. Regardless of whether it was in Chicago or the New Mexico laboratory, everyone knew that if the atomic bomb was possible, the Germans were probably ahead in this competition. In the laboratory at Chicago, many scientists felt extremely frustrated and even depressed about the possibility of Germany being ahead in the race to develop the atomic bomb. However, in Oppenheimer's laboratory, his charismatic leadership only motivated people to work harder and catch up with the Germans. The laboratory in New Mexico expanded from a few hundred people to over 6,000, thanks to his exceptional leadership skills. The research progress was initially unstable, and even in 1943, when the research was only halfway done, they realized that the initial concept for building the atomic bomb was not feasible. Without hesitation, Oppenheimer initiated a massive restructuring of the entire laboratory to focus all resources on a new manufacturing method, which caused little personnel turbulence. In reality, the pressures of war exposed the most dreadful side of human nature, even among those gentle and truth-seeking scientists. In October 1942, Oppenheimer received a letter from his friend, Victor Weisskopf, who had learned from another physicist that Werner Heisenberg, the director of the Nuclear Research Institute in Berlin and the Nobel Prize winner in physics in 1932, would be giving a lecture in Switzerland. Victor suggested that the best option now would be to kidnap Heisenberg in Switzerland because Nazi Germany would definitely do the same. Victor even volunteered to do the job himself. He was an esteemed physicist at that time, not the most prominent, but by today's standards, he would be considered a top scientist on par with luminaries like Heisenberg, Schrödinger, and Bohr, whom we usually only read about in textbooks as the founding figures of modern physics. It's surprising that such a scientist could come up with a plot straight out of a Hollywood movie, even being the instigator. This shows how war can drive people to resort to any means necessary. However, Oppenheimer was against the idea of kidnapping, not because he opposed kidnapping itself, but because he was concerned that it would alert the Nazis to focus even more on nuclear weapon development. In Oppenheimer's report to General Groves, he still considered it a good opportunity. Groves himself was not only very interested in this idea, he even sent agents directly to Switzerland. However, at the last moment, he decided to cancel the assassination plan, not the kidnapping plan. If you think that the craziest thing those scientists could come up with is what has been mentioned so far, then you're wrong. In May 1943, a researcher from the Manhattan Project proposed a suggestion, using food contaminated with radiation to kill 500,000 Germans. If you enjoy watching The Big Bang Theory, or have some knowledge of physics history, you must have heard of a person named Fermi, the Nobel Prize winner in physics in 1938, whom we mentioned earlier. He was the researcher who proposed this plan. The plan involved using a type of atomic fission byproduct called silphium and somehow mixing it into food supplies for Germans or Japanese. Oppenheimer seemed quite interested in this plan and reported it to Groves. He then discussed its feasibility with another scientist and received confirmation. After discussing various technical issues to be solved, Oppenheimer came to the conclusion that they should not attempt this plan unless they could poison enough food to kill 500,000 people, as the uneven distribution of radioactive material could lead to far fewer actual casualties. So, the reason this plan didn't materialize was not that they didn't want to kill so many people, but that they couldn't find an effective way to achieve this goal. In the horrors of World War II, seeing the concentration camps and mass extermination of Jews in Germany, many scientists became like ordinary people, willing to design new methods to kill hundreds of thousands of enemies. Some historians argue that since they couldn't directly reject any large-scale elimination plan, they set an almost impossible goal of killing 500,000 people to subtly obstruct the plan. I don't know if this should be considered highly ironic or deeply unsettling. While Nazi Germany found a so-called efficient method of killing Jews in gas chambers, a group of scientists on the other side of the ocean was discussing how to poison hundreds of thousands of Germans. 2 years later, as we are familiar with, the atomic bomb experiment was successful, followed by the explosions in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Manhattan Project remained top secret until after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Oppenheimer became a spokesperson for science, a household name, and his photo even appeared on the covers of Life and Time magazines. The success of the atomic bomb research elevated Oppenheimer's prestige to new heights in both the military and scientific communities. He also became one of the influential members of the Nuclear Energy Commission at the time. With Germany's defeat and the explosion of the first atomic bomb in Hiroshima, the urgency to continue researching atomic bombs decreased significantly. However, the dropping of the second atomic bomb made many scientists in the Manhattan Project angry because they felt the second bombing was unnecessary. This also forced Oppenheimer to reflect on the threat of nuclear weapons to humanity. In October 1945, Oppenheimer was granted an audience with President Truman. During the meeting, Oppenheimer expressed that he felt his hands were stained with blood because of the atomic bomb. This greatly concerned Truman, who immediately terminated the meeting. Truman later told his advisor, Clark Clifford, "I never want to see that man in my office again." In August 1949, after the Soviet Union successfully conducted its first atomic bomb explosion, the question of whether to continue researching the hydrogen bomb became a significant issue. As chairman of the advisory committee, Oppenheimer opposed the development of the hydrogen bomb, but Truman disregarded his advice. Later, Oppenheimer and several other important members left their positions and did not seek reappointment. Subsequently, in public settings, he opposed continued research on the hydrogen bomb and advocated for the United States and the Soviet Union to sign a joint ban on nuclear weapons. This put him at odds with the hawkish elements in the government and the military. What was even more important was that due to Oppenheimer's prestige and social influence, many high-ranking officials in Washington began to worry that his views on atomic bombs could have extremely dangerous implications in the government, military, and scientific communities. This included FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. Due to his close association with many communists, Oppenheimer had been on Hoover's watch list since the early 1940s. His home and office were already under FBI surveillance, and he was also placed on an internal FBI blacklist. People on this list could be arrested at any time during a national emergency. In November 1953, a key figure from the China Institute in Henan, William Bedell, wrote a letter to Hoover claiming that Oppenheimer was very likely a Soviet spy. Although President Eisenhower at the time thought it was basically baseless, given the political climate of that era, he had no choice but to agree to investigate Oppenheimer. Subsequently, Oppenheimer's arch-enemy and chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, Lewis Strauss, suspended Oppenheimer's security clearance to access classified information and forced him to resign voluntarily. Otherwise, he would have to participate in a hearing. We all know that although hearings are different from trials, lying during a hearing is a criminal offense. If one answers improperly during a hearing, it could completely ruin their reputation. It was the darkest period in modern American history, known as McCarthyism, where any position not taking a hard stance against the Soviet Union and any sympathy towards communism would lead to a hopeless disaster. Many scientists and public figures experienced political persecution during that time, with hundreds of people being charged and over 10,000 people losing their jobs. Due to their alleged sympathetic stance, many people lost their jobs, including the most famous movie star at the time, Charlie Chaplin, who had to leave the United States and settle in Switzerland. Oppenheimer, of course, couldn't escape this ordeal either. His private lawyer's wife witnessed him in a state of despair, and due to excessive anxiety and exhaustion, he even fainted on the bathroom floor. His friends and lawyers began to worry that his academic career and public image might come to an end. However, this time, Oppenheimer's intelligence came to his rescue again. He decided to refuse resignation and instead requested a hearing. During the hearing, including General Groves, who had discovered him, and a few scientists, provided unfavorable testimonies against him. But at the same time, more scientists, government officials, and military officers came forward to defend him. Even more dramatically, during the hearing, he even staged a performance of pretending to be mentally ill, openly calling himself an imbecile. This made many people feel that his mental state was not stable enough to continue holding an important position. However, it turned out that attending the hearing was a very wise decision. Since his security clearance would be canceled anyway, he had nothing to lose and didn't need to worry about preserving himself by associating with other alleged communists and leaving a stain on his scientific and political career. During the hearing, the scientist Edward Teller, who openly accused Oppenheimer, suffered a severe loss of reputation in the scientific community and was completely excluded. Furthermore, Oppenheimer's archenemy, Strauss, encountered many obstacles from Oppenheimer's friends in high-ranking positions when he sought the position of Secretary of Commerce in 1959. Senator Kennedy, who was serving at the time, cast the critical veto, effectively ending Strauss's political career. Oppenheimer himself was considered a victim of McCarthyism at the time, labeled as a warmonger and unfairly marked. Paradoxically, this actually made his image in the scientific community more glorious. Afterward, Oppenheimer basically faded out of the political scene and traveled the world giving lectures. Due to his long-term smoking, he developed throat cancer and passed away in February 1967. In 1963, before his death, President Kennedy awarded him the Enrico Fermi Award to show political harmony. In 2022, 50 years after his death, the U.S. government decided to revoke the 1954 decision to cancel his security clearance and confirmed Oppenheimer's loyalty to the country. Oppenheimer's legendary story has come to an end. However, what we should remember is not just his achievements, but also the impact of war on ordinary people and the most outstanding individuals. These scientists were not inherently evil people. In fact, they were often very kind in their personal lives. However, when they became involved in war, they were willing to resort to kidnapping and even mass poisoning of ordinary people without hesitation. Therefore, what we should remember more is Oppenheimer and his colleagues' unwavering opposition to war and the nuclear arms race after the war. This would be the best way to commemorate him. Thank you for watching.